Hallo miteinander, I'm Gish86 and this is the Disappearing of Gensokyo. Last time we took a cosmic dive until we stood in front of an ancient Empress Dowager of China. We brought Chirno to meet the very same. Marissa's speed won't be as necessary. As our friends have told us, only an even greater power can beat supreme power. They seem to have been right about Junko. She isn't twisted or malevolent, just very focused on her revenge and potentially cruel within that obsession. We learn here that getting to the moon was her prize for aiding Reimu. Agreeing to such an alliance against the Lunarians is so unlike the Shrine Maiden. To call upon a former enemy really shows how desperate Reimu is in resolving this incident. Noble Junko honors this pact and is unwilling to help us as she has not profited from us similarly. That and she does not trust us. At that point, Tenshi makes a last-ditch effort and tries to sell fluffy raisin to Junko. Now she's really just making a fool out of herself. Who in their right mind would take up such a ridiculous offer? Well, most of the Touhou fandom could be bribed with raisin, I am sure. Me too, you could probably buy me with the prospect of cuddling raisin. The negotiations have failed and Junko powers up. We now have an opponent who is brute force incarnate and her fighting style reflects that. Bullet patterns here are generally easy to dodge, for some you do not even need to move. Cold Star is an example. If you stand still on low distance, almost point blank, the whole barrage misses you. The lack of finesse in Junko's attacks is evened out by their extreme destructiveness. If you get caught, you are likely to be pinballed around and damaged over and over. You can fall from full shield to death in less than a second, just like we did here, unfortunately. That really summed up the fight. Everything hits like a truck, and you have minimal room for error. On the other hand, it is not that hard to keep up with Junko's patterns, even if you play as a slower character. For a change, Marissa is not the overperformer. The most important skill here is memorization. You need to know your cues and steps. That's what I was talking about when I mentioned death zoning last episode. You are punished hard for being at the wrong spot at the wrong time. This becomes especially true once Junko mixes Pure Circle into her arsenal. That's the waves of explosions that start far away and then wander inward. They're always combined with another move, for example Cold Star or the explosive globes. Essentially, you're forced to keep the distance to Junko very low. At around 25% of her health, Junko casts Perfect Wave and Line, possibly the most impressive and over-the-top spell card of DOG. The boss cannot be damaged during its runtime, and the lasers are generally less dangerous than the little bullets. Not what you would expect, I know. We've done it. Junko is beaten. Let us mock the loser as we so often do. Defeating her with a 1 credit clear in the ever so brutal Touhou 15 would be a bigger feat, but in the constraints of this game, she is still very challenging. Surprisingly, the divine spirit of vengeance is not at all a sore loser. Our victory has really won us her respect and cooperation. I guess that alliance wasn't so unbreakable after all. By the way, if you don't deal damage fast enough during the final phase, Junko will repeat Perfect Wave and Line. That is something you really don't want, as that spell card is a major threat. it rarely goes as well for me as you just saw. We learn that Reimu is no villain. She too wants to solve the incident, primarily by getting rid of the outside invaders and remedying the strange changes in the Gensokyan's personalities. Our companions start listing examples, partially very crude and worrisome examples. There were signs, but now it is official. Memes and fanfiction are consuming paradise. I suppose the butt drilling had a reason to take place after all. Incidents need to be resolved, sure, but a new problem arises. Tenshi and her friends have grown quite fond of their white and black and whatever imposters. If Reimu solves this her way, the phantoms will be gone. What does this mean if they disappear? Will they go somewhere? Will they be dead? We cannot know. Understanding this makes the incident a concern of Tenshi more than ever. The level ends after we find one of Yukari's gaps. That will lead us to our next destination, but first we're having another pit stop at the Azure Fortress. Overall, Junko can give you a very hard time. I have had plenty of deaths against her in the past, yet I wouldn't say she tops Remilia. The bout with the vampire is even more dynamic. You don't have to stay in motion as much for Junko. As I said, memorization is key. The execution itself is not nearly as difficult. Plus, the player has had more time to practice. Having a very tough boss fight again won't be nearly as overwhelming as it was the first time against Remilia. You will have a few learning attempts that you will lose shamefully, but if your nerves have carried you this far, you're unlikely to get stuck and give up. Iku hints that next time could be our finale. Is that really true? We have had 4 chapters with 4 levels each. Shouldn't the game go on for at least another 4 levels to keep the rhythm? Possibly. One more thing about the most bombastic spell card, Perfect Wave and Line. I've had it glitch out sometimes before in a way that there were no broad openings between the little bullets. Try and position yourself in the center of the arena as it's cast. I've had the impression that lowers the chance for the attack to behave insanely. Man, Tenshi really hates Byakuren and would rather converse with anyone else. Speaking of insane things, we could now recruit Clown Piece if we had the points. It makes sense that this wouldn't be possible sooner. To get control of her while Junko was still her temporary master would have been silly. Yes, you saw right. Reisen was lying face down on that porch there. She is so exhausted, she now falls unconscious wherever, I guess. The running gag of the overworked Reisen and her hostile relation to Tenshi is something I have heard other Let's Players criticize about DOG. It doesn't bother me too much, but I also wouldn't call it a strong point. I may be neutral on the subject, yet I can see how the two protagonists' chemistry would annoy someone. Another word on Clown Piece. She's really getting handed around. You could call it fairy trafficking if you wanted. First, Hikatsuya lent her to Junko, which I can still somewhat understand. Now, Clown Piece has technically gone under our command. You know when someone borrows an item from you and when you want it returned, you learn they lent it to someone else? In the end, you follow a chain of like 10 strangers to hopefully get your possession back. I think that's what Hikatsuya's in for in regards to her fairy slave. Back on track, we find out Mistia has fulfilled her dream of a barbecue stall in heaven. I hadn't kept count, but I feel like this has slipped her mind at least 5 times. Cherno, Sakuya the Magician and White Tenshi make up the helper staff. In the previous episode, we were in fact promised a massive 80% discount. That is unfortunately something this clever crew has conveniently forgotten. We're even scolded for innocently bringing it up again. You just can't win against Bird Brain and Brain Freeze. In this speech bubble, Tenshi says LOL. You already know I don't like emoticons in semi-earnest video games. With chat speak, it is no better. I actually had a buddy who would monotonally say LOL in real life instead of actually laughing. He was alright in other regards, otherwise we could not have become friends. Tenshi has done something extraordinary for her kind. She is treating everyone to a meal, even Yoshika, who she's been getting along with so poorly. Could it be that so deep in our adventure, Tenshi is actually becoming a better person? Is this a redemption story in the same vein as Tenjo no Tempest was? Perhaps, but she may have also felt pressured into being especially nice there. But yeah, this is another similarity to the other fan game starring Tenshi, which DOG should only have something to do with by coincidence. We have two former mortal enemies in front of us, yet Tenshi stays docile. That is laudable. We can't get anything from Kogasa. We might never get anything from Kogasa ever again. The remaining upgrades that are sensible to buy cost so many points. Now what crazy scene did we walk in on here? Are there two Alice the Artists now? Tenshi's first instinct is that the Phantom has copied Magician Sakuya's duplication technique. In reality, it is just true Alice playing dress up. The idea behind this is to test Marissa whether she can tell who the real Alice is. All this time, DOG has been pretty unshy about establishing that Marissa and Alice are romantically with each other. Lesbians in Gensokyo, whoever heard of that? If Marissa had guessed incorrectly and not recognized her lover, Oku had the order to turn the witch into nuclear sludge. That's Alice Margatroyd for you. She will either be the one to love you, or make sure no one else ever will be. Only in fanfiction though. Once more, I need to remind that the incident itself is manipulating the residents of Gensokyo. Alice's tsundere and yandere nature, as well as the idea that characters are paired with others, makes perfect sense for this game. As this joke concludes, I wanted to talk about the boss fight once again. Know what I like best about it? The music. The track we heard while fighting Junko is played on all difficulty levels and called Color of the Moon. It was made by a person or group called Euphonics. Even MyACG themselves seem to be especially enamored by the piece, as it even accompanies the game's promotional trailer on Steam. I can easily understand why you would choose it to sell your product. Honestly, I think it's my favorite song in all of DOG. Yes, even against Senya and Risa Yuzuki, it holds up. Color of the Moon is a Pure Furies rearrange that has enough urgency to work with a late-game, high-stakes boss battle. The mystical, angelic choir then makes it perfect. A lot of vocal tracks in DOG are amazing to listen to out of context, but don't always match the tone. Opposite World, for example, is a ballad. It doesn't naturally go with you and a vampire beating the life and unlife out of each other. It also reaches its emotional climax so late you've either won or died before then. Color of the Moon, on the other hand, feels like it was made with a conflict in mind, possibly because it's still very close to the original Pure Furies. That's a very divisive theme, by the way, very high in the polls, but you can find loads of people who don't like it at all. That might be because it's Zun being daring. It's very chaotic, almost on par with Unknown Was Her. It's definitely not for everyone. On the subject of music, that's also why we never ended up fighting Yorihime. That's right, the Moon Princess has been a red herring all this time. What song would have even played for her? Like I said, she's never appeared in the official games. Maybe MyACG just wanted to throw a bit of lore around about an underappreciated character. We learn here that Tenshi and Reimu have a very similar mindset. Both just want to do what feels right and good. Still, the protagonists of our story shouldn't leave the incident to Reimu alone. It can only help to have a second opinion on a problem. Yes, Byakuren, we are not sophisticated, we are total meatheads. It's got to be phrasing like this that makes Tenshi hate the High Priestess, even though she has been giving us pretty sound boss advice. Junko, like all chapter bosses before her, spat out 3 magic pieces, bringing our counter up to 45 out of 48. That's another clue on the fact that we are deep within the endgame. Unless the OG makes us play several levels without collectibles in them. With that, we're leaving it for today. I'm Gish86, this was the Disappearing of Gensokyo, and next time we better grab a pen and draw our own map of the 7th floor, so that we have any chance of reaching Tam's foe this century. Bis bald!